Two groups to mention. One is the Gardens group, which Carol Williams has taken on very bravely. It sort of didn't do anything for a long time, basically closed down during the pandemic, and she's trying to reinvigorate it by arranging all sorts of events, but very few people are turning up, unfortunately, and she would like some extra help to keep things going and to organise future events. So if that's something that would appeal to you, or you know would appeal to somebody who's not here but in the group, can you pass it on, please? The other one is the Computing IT group. Now that's a bit of a misnomer really, because it sounds as though it's terribly technical, and it isn't. What Andy Arnold is doing is trying to run a group for people who have doubts or concerns or worries about using their particular device, whether it be a laptop or an iPad or a phone. So it's a demystification process rather than turning you all into very competent coders. He was oversubscribed when he started, and we had to turn people away. But now he's running out of people. He's obviously too good at it. So if that's something that would help you, and again, or somebody you know it might help, then please get in touch with Andy, or get in touch with me, whichever, and I'll pass on your inquiry. So we would like to keep those two things going if we can. One other bit of group news, you may remember this, which we advertised last time, and in fact it took place. And just to remind you, in case you haven't seen the pictures, which we plastered all over the place, this is on the top of Brown Willie on Bodmin Moor. People looking a little bit chilly, I think, and not unduly happy, but they're there. By about lunchtime, we'd moved on to the top of Dartmoor. This is High Willhays. The sun's starting to come out. People are smiling and looking a bit more comfortable. And then finally, about 6 o'clock, we got to the top of Dunkery Beacon, and there's some hot, smiley, tired people just about to go to the pub. You'll see we carried this banner around with us, and we brought it along today to try and personalise the room a bit. So that was quite nice to have it with us when we did it. So that was a great success. A lot of fun for the people who did it, and the photos and the press release have gone into the Tiverton Gazette, Devon Live website, Third Age Matters, the U3A National Newsletter, and we've tried to impress upon them it was our celebration of the 40th anniversary, our way of doing something to mark the event. So nothing else, it raises the profile of Tiverton U3A, I believe it. Right, now the website, which hopefully you all recognise. It's not too strange to you. We think most of you go to it at some point, if only to get a newsletter. But there are various other things along the top there, the tabs you can see: welcome, social net groups, what's on, etc. And what John and I thought would be a good idea would be to just take a look at one of those at each meeting and just show you what's there, and not trying to give you any technical details, but just to show you how you might use it, because you might be cautious about doing so. And so the one we picked on today is the Groups tab. So you forget the rest of them for the time being. They may happen in the future, but for the moment John's going to come on and talk for a few minutes about the Groups tab. So we just need to switch the display.
The groups area is a bit underutilised. We get stats on the website every month. I get stats, and not many people go into the groups. So we try to enhance it a little bit to encourage people to use it more. So this is the groups page. You basically have little icons in each group, and clicking on the hyperlinks above the icons will take you into that group's page. So here is one. This is book readers. So some slight changes to the groups page now. We have our calendar, which has dates pertaining specifically to when that group meets, as opposed to a general calendar which shows you all of the Tiverton U3A events. Also, we have the standard contact page link. If you click on that, you'll be asked for a password, which is 1956. Okay, just remember that. And you can get the group officers' details, their emails, their telephone numbers, etc. You can also do two other things now on the group's page. You can actually sign up to a group if you're not a member of it. Okay, I'll show you that in a second. And you can also view the details of other members in your group, their telephone numbers and their email addresses. Okay, so that hopefully will be quite helpful for people. Okay, the password is 1956. Just remember the Suez Canal, okay? It's a good way of remembering it. And you will be asked for this password to get into the more sensitive details, members' details on the website. Remember that. The same password is used for everything on the website. Everywhere you'll be asked for a password, it's always 1956. Okay?
Don't tell anyone.
Where's the capital letter and hashtag?
No, 1956. It's very straightforward. So this is where you're able to sign up to a group, and there's a pull-down list there which tells you every group we're running in the Tiverton U3A. On completion of that, I will get an email, and I will check to see whoever has signed up is actually a member of Tiverton U3A. No, it happens. This week I've had people actually signing up to groups, not being members of the U3A, but have in fact joined on the basis of that group being available. So it's a great way of promoting the organisation. I will then contact the group coordinator, okay, if somebody signs up, and I will add that person to Beacon. So the next point to make is not all group coordinators use Beacon, which is the database system that runs the U3A. So if a group leader does not put their group members' details on Beacon, I'm afraid I can't extract that data. And that's important if you want to find out other members who are in your group if they've never been registered by the group coordinator on Beacon. So this is the view of the group members, okay? This is how you'll see it. And as I say, this extract is taken directly from the U3A Beacon system. So the other plug's not groups, but it's a plug for Roger Gunn over there who's making these excellent videos as we speak. And we've now got links to those videos on the website. There are 3 there at the moment, the Mid-Devon Messenger, Traversing the Pyrenees, and the 3 Peaks Challenge. So please go in and have a look at these wonderful videos.
Excellent.
That's me.
Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Yes.
Excellent. So, and hopefully we'll look at something else next time, another aspect of the website, but in the same sort of quick look. Right, okay. I think that just about covers all the business announcements we've got for now. So we move on to today's speaker.
So thank you very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be with you. I want to tell you some stuff about ShelterBox. Maybe some stuff you already know, maybe some stuff you don't know. I want to tell you how we work, where we're working, why we do what we do, and perhaps the continuing need for the work that we do. I'm going to ask you loads of questions during this session. I don't expect any answers from you at all. You can do thinking inside your head. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you do fancy giving an answer, if I ask a question and you think, well, I'll give it a go, then please do put your hand up and we'll see how you get on. So my first question is this. There we go. What's in the box? Thank you very much. So that's my first question. And you can see here is the ShelterBox. This is this iconic box which ShelterBox has been using for many years now. So I'm not going to ask you for an answer, but just think about it for the time being. Whilst you do think about it, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my ShelterBox story. So up until last July, when I was a geography teacher, I was head of geography in a comprehensive school in Hampshire. And the day I left, that's what my classroom looked like. That was last July. So I've not been a teacher now for about a year. If you were to look really carefully at my displays on the walls, you would see quite a few displays to do with ShelterBox, because I first found out about ShelterBox through teaching geography at GCSE. Since I've stopped being a teacher, I've started to become more and more involved in ShelterBox, and here I am in an event in Dorset that I put on with another colleague of mine, and we were raising awareness, trying to raise funds as well. But the reason I found out about ShelterBox was through teaching disasters at GCSE level geography. And we were teaching about Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines in 2013. And ShelterBox, within the actual geography curriculum, ShelterBox was mentioned as a response to Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. And you can see here the boxes being delivered, the tents being starting to be erected. And I first found out about it when the new geography curriculum came in about 6 years ago. And I'd never heard of them before. And then I got so inspired, I thought, well, when I stop teaching, I'm going to start to get involved in ShelterBox. And here I am. Here is Typhoon Haiyan approaching the Philippines. So the Philippines is this group of islands here in Southeast Asia, and Typhoon Haiyan, this superstorm, is about to devastate the northern islands in particular. So here's my first question for you. There are more than 113 million people who are homeless because of natural disasters, because of extreme weather, and also conflict. My first question for you, remember I don't require an answer from you unless you would like to give one, is are you confident to divide this number up into two groups? One group is that, disasters and weather. How many of those 113 million have been made homeless because of disasters and weather? And how many have been made homeless because of conflict?
60-40.
Any hands?
60-40. That's
60-40 as a ratio, yeah?
Yeah.
50.
Okay, let me show you the numbers. Disasters and weather, out of 113 million, 30 million. So therefore, because of conflict, it's therefore 83 million. So yeah, about right with those ratios. So that's amazing, isn't it? So our vision, one of the things that most attracted me to ShelterBox was the simplicity of its vision. Our vision is this: no matter what the disaster, no matter what the nature, no one goes without shelter. And you can see we're working all around the world in whatever situation might be causing that loss of shelter. And here is one of our straplines. And I want to highlight just a couple of words within this strapline. We work with people all over the world who've lost their homes because of all sorts of disasters, whether it be conflict or earthquakes, hurricanes, natural disasters, whatever. So I think that's really important, really simple. No one without shelter, and working with people all over the world. Now you may already know this, but ShelterBox started as part of the Rotary Club, one of the Millennium Projects. The Rotary Club of Helston Lizard decided that they would set up this organisation to provide shelter to people who had lost their homes. And they set up in the year 2000, it was actually 1999, but they started becoming operational in the year 2000. And in the year 2000, their aim was to help between 10 to 15 families. Between 10 to 15 families. Now, ShelterBox is part of or affiliated with Rotary. I've got the Rotary badge here. I'm not a Rotarian, but I am involved in ShelterBox. Since the year 2000, over the last 20 odd years, we've gone from this local Cornish charity to now a world authority on emergency shelter. And we're working with partners all around the world, and that partnership with these partner groups is always growing. Originally, the people who set up these boxes said, what do people need when they've lost their shelter? And they put a load of stuff in, a shovel, a sleeping bag, a light, and said, there you go, that will sort you out. But since then, we have adapted. And rather than just going, here you are, here's your stuff, now recover, we actually think about what approach would be best for those people in that area, in their situation. So it's really adapted since the year 2000. And this is something that many people aren't actually very aware of. So originally, the aim was to help between 10 to 15 families. we've had a presence in almost 100 countries now, and in April 2021 we reached 2 million people. So let me tell you a little bit about 2021, our impact. So one of the things I realised when I was a teacher is that numbers don't really mean anything unless you put them into context. So 29,000 people, if I was to say that to my pupils, they might not have a clue what 29,000 people is. So 29,000 families, rather. If we take a family unit of 5 people, then that's roughly about 140,000 people. So 140,000 people is greater than that place there, the population of that place there. Anybody know where that is? This is Exeter, yeah. So that's Exeter. So Exeter, I think, is about 120,000 people. So in 2021, we reached a population greater than the size of Exeter. And in 9 countries. There are those 9 countries. So here's another little test for you.
Go on, Dominic.
Yeah. So, here they are in alphabetical order. Again, if I was to say this to my pupils, some of them would be going, "Sir, Burkina Faso, where on earth? I've never heard of that before." You may remember it was once called Upper Volta. Any ideas where Burkina Faso is? It's in West Africa. I'll put a red X in. There it is. So there's Burkina Faso. And staying in Africa, Cameroon. And again, staying in Africa, Ethiopia. Then we've got the next 2 up here, the H's, Haiti and Honduras, both in the same region of the world. So there's Haiti, and there's Honduras. I'm hoping you know where India is. Back to Africa, Nigeria, the most populous country of Africa, Africa's powerhouse. Then still in Africa again, we've got Sudan, and of course Syria. So these are the 9 countries that we had a presence in 2021. But there are 2 more countries that we have a presence in 2022, 2 further countries. Would anybody like to suggest what they are? Ukraine, of course, yeah. And another one? It's not Afghanistan. No. Well, we do have a presence in Yemen, but that's ever changing, isn't it? The other one is, I've mentioned it before, the Philippines, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about our presence in a couple of these countries later on. And remember, we have a presence no matter what the reason for that loss of shelter. And the ShelterBox plays a vital part in helping communities to recover. Now, I was hoping to show you a video, but I'm not sure that it's going to work, so I'm just going to skip it because it might just make the whole thing hang up. So, as I said earlier, ShelterBox is affiliated with Rotary. It was born out of Rotary Club. And Rotary, I don't know if you're aware, but they have a presence all around the world. And therefore, what that helps us to do is to get an in those countries. We get local knowledge, we get local understanding, local contacts. So when we want to distribute this aid, we can work through Rotary and also their partner organisations as well. And that's a huge help. That's a huge head start to help us reach those places that most need it. I'm not going to try and show you this video because I'm worried that it might not work. So, again, our mission: to provide shelter, essential items, technical assistance to the world's most vulnerable to help them recover and rebuild. Have you seen this place before? If you've been to Truro, if you've been to Moorfields car park, you might see the big ShelterBox headquarters there. They used to have an amazing display on the ground floor where you could walk around all the tents, you could walk around the work that some of the people who were living inside these tents were doing. It was an incredible display, but unfortunately COVID shut it all down and it hasn't got off the ground again yet. But there is the ShelterBox HQ. Now, what used to happen was we would ship out this aid to various countries around the world, and you can see when I say we work with people all over the world, there are some countries up there where you might be thinking to yourself, really? You help them out? Do they need it? The countries in green here. But we used to ship out the aid from Truro, obviously in Cornwall. And there's the Truro warehouse, or this one was actually in Helston. And what we used to do was put it onto a plane and then get it out there as quickly as we could. I think that's an Antonov. However, it's changed. As we've been doing this, it's become apparent that actually it's better to ship out the items individually. It's more cost effective. And if we ship out the items, particularly to places where we know are going to be affected, so for example the Philippines, we can pre-position all the aid items. Now we know that the Philippines is going to be affected in some way. It might be a volcano, it might be an earthquake, it might be a tsunami. So we know, or a tropical storm for example, we know that the Philippines is going to be affected. So therefore, if we pre-position our aid, when it does happen, we've got a further head start, along with using all our partner organisations. So rather than perhaps being cumbersome, we can now be really effective in the way that we respond. Here's an example. This lady is called Teresita. She's 79 years old. She lives in the island of Luzon in the north of the Philippines. And in 2020, volcano Tar erupted. The quote at the end there says, "We were just at our house around 7 in the evening when the volcano erupted. There is Tar here, just south of Manila." And this is the actual eruption of Tar. Like 1,000 families living in the area, they had to go and find temporary shelter, and this is where they ended up: a collective centre, a school, a church, a community hall, somewhere that could house people. But they had nothing. They had to just leave, obviously, as so many people do. And they found themselves living in these conditions. When they could eventually return home, they visited the house, and all that was left was this. So, it was damaged by rocks. You'd think it might be ash, it might be a lahar, a mud flow, but it's the rocks that were from the eruption that have damaged her house. However, you can see here, remember this was in January when it erupted. In May 2020, she managed to collect a shelter kit. And that shelter kit here had tools, solar lights, mosquito nets, and it allowed them to just extend their footprint of their home, which is really important in a time of coronavirus as well. And Teresita says we use the solar lights when there's a blackout, tarpaulins used as shelter for the veranda. So there's one example of the way that we help. But we can't help everybody. So therefore, there is a response criteria that's been developed. And the response criteria are 6 things to think about. The first one is this: has the government of the country declared a state of emergency? Have they put out a call for help? If they have, then we can respond. How many families are in need of aid? And if it's at least 200, then we will respond. If it's less than 200, then it's based on how many of these you can fit in a container. We can fit 200 of these in a container. So if we were only responding to 150 families, then we're paying for a container to only take 150 boxes. So therefore, at least 200 families. And the type of aid that they need. Do they need water? Do they need sanitation? Do they need food? Do they need medicine? Or do they need shelter? And how much time? It should be a response which lasts for at least 3 months. And if that response is going to last for 3 months and there's at least 200 families in need and they need shelter and the government has said we need help, then we will respond. There's also this: how capable is the country to help themselves? So do they have charities? Do they have organisations? Are they set up to respond or not? And finally, how many resources do we have? So all those things could be ticked, but if we don't have enough resources, then we can't respond. So therefore, I'd like you to think about this question here. How essential is a shelter box? Before we answer that question, I'm going to ask a couple of other questions as well. So first of all, how much? There's loads of ways we could finish off that question there. How much what? So firstly, how much capacity? If we were to put litres of water in this box, how many litres of water could fit in here? When I used to ask questions like this of my pupils, you could see some of them would sit there going, oh my God, I haven't got a clue. Is it 10? Is it 400? Is it 8,000? I really don't know. But I've heard a couple of people. 200, 185 litres. So capacity, 185 litres. However, there is a new box. That 185 one, this is the original shelter box. We've also got another one which is now smaller, which is actually 66 litres. So perhaps you can reach more families with a smaller box. And here is someone, I can't remember her name unfortunately, I think she's in the Munros, doing all the Munros with a shelter box on her back. It wasn't full. So it was really easy, wasn't it? So a bit of fundraising there. Here's another question for you. How much do they weigh? So there's some of the contents of a shelter box. How much do they weigh? You don't have to give me an answer. Okay, that might help you. Have you ever done that? I was saying to Fergus a minute ago, we've just got back from a cruise. We went on a cruise around the Baltics, and I went with my wife and my daughter. And my daughter packed her case. And then said, Dad, can you take that downstairs because it's too heavy for me to lift? And standing at the top of the stairs with this massive case going, well, I've got to get from here down to there without killing myself with this suitcase. If you were to go on a plane, a suitcase, the limit that they allow you is about 23 kilos. So 50 kilos is one of these boxes fully laden, or 2 suitcases. So they're heavy. So let's talk about some of these items then. I've taken that image, made it bigger now. Some of these items are really obvious. You know, it's obvious that, for example, that is a saw. Yeah? There's other things which are really obvious. I'm just going to take my glasses. There's other things that are really obvious. So, for example, heating equipment. There's a hammer there, there's a shovel. But is there anything else that you're not sure about? Anything else that you're looking at going, well, I wonder what that is?
Water purifier?
Which one? This one here? Okay, so that's a water filter. I'll talk about that in a second.
Some of those round things, there's one that looks like a saucepan, but I can't tell the other.
Up here?
Yeah.
Over here, so we've got saucepans, frying pans, we've got plates, we've got the kitchen set, we've got cups, we've got a scouring pad over here.
What's that brown, long brown thing? Slide. No, the other, that thing, yeah. What is it?
Yeah, this is rope.
This is what?
Rope. Anything else?
Yeah, what's the thing underneath the saucepan with that?
Thing underneath the saucepan here, though.
Yes.
Any ideas? A solar light, yeah. Okay.
The thing below, next door to the hammer.
This one?
Yeah.
Any ideas? Mosquito net, yeah. So I've got a couple of things here. So here's the mosquito net. And when we hand this aid out, we say it's yours. They don't need to buy it from us. They don't give us anything. It's literally a completely altruistic gift. This is yours. And they will use it in any way they see fit. So there's 2 mosquito nets in here. One of them could be used to keep mosquitoes out. Thank God for that. But another use for it might be to actually do fishing with. So they can use it in any which way they like. It's theirs. And once they've finished with it, they might then sell it or trade it for something else. Anything else up here which you're not sure about? What's this over here? Well, it's tarpaulin, yeah, so I've got a tarpaulin. Here it is. Tarpaulin to be used in whichever way you want. Maybe a ground sheet, maybe a roof, maybe a wall, who knows. any way which can be effective. So there's a tarpaulin there.
There's no tent.
You're right. There is no tent on this image, and I'll come to that in a second. Yeah. Okay. So how much then? So we know how much they weigh. We know how much capacity is there. So let's talk about these individual items. Again, I'll ask you to think, but I don't want an answer from you. How much would a rope cost? How much would you be willing to pay for that length of rope there? When we pack it, when we buy it, when we procure it, we pay £8. Can you see that top right-hand corner? £8 for the rope. Then there's this, the mosquito nets. So 2 mosquito nets, £10. Then this, the tarpaulin. How much would you pay for a tarpaulin? 16. Then that. This is a solar light, and we'll give 2 solar lights, £11 each. Then we got this, the empty green box itself. That's got a cost, £28. The kitchen set, £30. Thermal blankets, you can't see them on there, on that image, but we will sometimes send those out if they're required, £35 for 5 thermal blankets. And then that's the water filter. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second. The water filter and water carriers, £51. So if you put all that together, then you get 200 quid. But, as was pointed out, there's something missing. And that might have been a little bit, that might have thrown you when I showed you the contents, but something really significant was missing when I asked you how much they might weigh, each box might weigh. And that's that, the tent. So the tent will fit inside that box with all that equipment. And a tent will cost, well, this is a high specification tent. It's got to survive temperatures of -20 in winter to +40 in summer. So for example, somewhere like Syria, this tent might last 1 year maximum, having gone through all those temperature changes. The tent is £385. So put it all together then, it's about £600 per box. Now I'm going to ask you another question. You don't need to give me an answer. I'm not after an answer. If you could only take 3, make a list inside your head. Which 3 would you take?
Water filter, tent, and the...
Okay, so I'm going to ask you another question here. For the 3 that you had in your head, was this item within the top 3? Put your hand up if it was. Okay, so let's think about this. Remember, we provide shelter and essential items, technical assistance to those people, the most vulnerable people, to help them recover. So let's have a think about the box itself. We've spoken about mosquito nets, saws, tarpaulins, ropes, all the rest of it. Let's think about the actual box itself. What might these people here be using that box for, apart from sitting on it? This is watertight, so you can use it for water. Collecting rainwater, yeah. What about this? And their quote is, we keep our school books dry. Here's another one. Here's Faso in Ethiopia. And she uses it. You can see she puts things on it. She stores things in it. But she says here, we store the cooking utensils inside the box. We also use it for clothes before we clean them. Then, when they're clean, we put them in another place. It can be used in all sorts of ways. So, for example, it could be used as a desk, as a table, as a chair, as a bench. Let me take you to northern Namibia now. The worst flooding for 40 years. Margaretha was pregnant with baby Emmanuel when the floods swept through her village in Namibia. When her newborn arrived weeks later, she used it as a crib. So now I'd like to think, how essential is a shelter box? Not just the contents as well. So everything has got a use, everything is useful in some ways. And that's one of the things that is always said about the people, the shelter box response team members who go out to these places, is the ingenuity that is put into all the equipment here. Nothing is wasted. So, reviewing the aid. Remember I said that back in the year 2000, the Rotary Club of House and Lizard wanted to help 10 to 15 people, and they packed a box full of stuff which they said, this is what you need when you lose a home, here it is, have it. Well, since then, obviously, our practice has changed and been amended, and we're always reviewing the aid. So let's talk about this one here, the one some of you asked, well, what's this here? It is a solar light. And here is that solar light. I've got one, I've got a couple actually. So, here's one here. Okay? And they're amazing. So we've got the solar panel at the top, and after charging it, you've now got light for 16 hours. They are lightweight and adaptable. So what you could do is unfasten this, and then you could strap it around your arm, for example. So you've got two hands free and a load of light. Or perhaps you could attach it to a hat or something like that, or you can just hang it up. So they're adaptable, they're lightweight. They can float in water because they're inflated. And, what else? Something that you can't see on that one there, but you might be able to see on this one here. So this is the old style, this is the newer adapted style. Can you see any difference between the one there? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I know it's really difficult to see. It hasn't got the time on it. What this one has got, but that one hasn't, is this here. So you can charge your phone. How cool is that? So you can charge your phone. Now I want you to think, obviously, have a think about these two people here at the bottom. How would this be just so essential for these two people at the bottom? In what ways might they find having a light like this useful?
Fishing?
For fishing, perhaps, yeah. Schoolwork. You can do homework. You can continue with your schoolwork at night time.
Use their phones.
Charge their phones so they can play whatever it is.
How's it charged?
So the solar sun will charge the solar panel, and then you plug your phone in and it stores the energy from the panel into your phone. It's amazing, isn't it?
So it's only suitable in sunny areas, really?
You can actually get charged through cloud. It is possible to do that. The other thing I think is really important here is it gives security. So if your home has been washed away, you obviously don't have a toilet anymore. So if in the middle of the night nature calls, then you've got some security, some gender security. And also, it helps you avoid snakes as well. Here's our water filter. Now, I was saying that we are constantly adapting the equipment that we use. Here is one of the old style. And I've got it because no one else wants it. And unfortunately, this was being used, but it's been used incorrectly. This is where the water comes out of, this blue tube here. But what was being used was this one here, which is the dirty water. So it kind of failed in its function. So therefore now we've got this new filter, which is a bit like a coffee percolator. You open it up at the top, and there's the paper which will filter out all the big pieces of sediment. But you've also got this filter here, which will take out bacteria. So therefore, you are able to filter 2,000 litres of water. And now you're not going to have those waterborne diseases. You can hang it up there, look. You can collect rainwater, you can filter it further. So that's contained within one of these, with one of the shelter boxes as well, if it's required. But actually, our technology has moved on, and a Rotarian was thinking to himself, I can do better than that. And in his own garage, he came up with something called Griffade. Now have a look at the number here. 200,000 litres. It's a little bit more of a technical piece of equipment, but it's so much better than what we've been providing in the past. So our aid is constantly adapting, constantly being amended. This is in Syria, and you can see the need for water filters. So the puddles on the ground is not rain. So you can imagine what those puddles are. So therefore it's really important to have access to clean water as well. We continue to operate through COVID, and in fact you can see here that the equipment helps to combat the spread. So now, of course, you can socially distance. So rather than living in these communal collective centres or compounds, you're able to socially distance in family units. We will provide good hygiene equipment. We've also got this, promoting better health. So educating people and modifying distribution practices. So if you have a look here, this is in Burkina Faso. And you can see the chap in the middle here with the grey, red, white jumper, he's inflating one of those solar lights, but they are all 2 metres apart. So, it's interesting when you look at this and you go, COVID really did happen everywhere, didn't it? And everybody had to go through those responses in order to try and minimise the infection rates. So disasters don't stop, neither do we. Here's a quote from the head of Rotary Club last year. Well, in fact, we raised £14 million last year. £14 million paid for 20,000 shelter boxes. Here's the quote. I'll take you back to this. I showed you right at the beginning. We work with people. So we will speak to them. What is it that you need? What do you require? What is going to be best for you? And maybe a box full of all that equipment isn't what's required. So therefore we're working with people all over the world, with partner organisations, to work out what is needed, by who, where, and how we get it there. So therefore we'll provide that technical assistance. And the people themselves will find out ways of getting this aid to where it's needed as well. But like I said, we work with people all over the world. So for example, we have given aid to the USA. Why? When? Quite a few years ago now. It's not wildfires. Quite a few years ago. Something devastating. Hurricane Katrina, yeah. Hurricane Katrina hit, utter devastation. It was awful. You had people living in the Astrodome, didn't you? We responded to the USA. Can you believe that? Because people needed an aid. People were without shelter. Now, after a while, the USA paid us everything back because they're able to. But some countries won't be able to do that. But we did respond because there was a requirement. So it's not only in countries like Burkina Faso, for example, or Cameroon. Now, this was my very first slide at the beginning, and you may have seen that there's the iconic green box being taken to places really remote to access places, difficult to access places. And I asked you that question there. But did you see this image as well? So this image, and if I take you back to Teresita as well, I said to you that Teresita picked up a shelter kit. This over here isn't a shelter kit. This is a shelter box. A shelter kit looks like this. So that's something different. And you can see it over there on the right-hand side. There's a pile of them stacked up. So this is another way in which we are adapting our provision. So if I take you back to the Nepal earthquake, this is one of the first times that we trialled the shelter kit. And if I tell you about Surya, she was eating a meal when the earthquake struck. Her father-in-law helped to get her out, but she didn't, or tried to get her out, she didn't make it in time, so she became trapped. Her mother and father-in-law rescued her. Then, of course, she went looking for her son. She found her son, who happened to be in a field, an open field, thank goodness, because there is a saying, earthquakes don't kill people, but buildings do. And so therefore, her son was in an open field and she found him. These aren't images that are specifically directed to or linked to the comments, they are just images. The family wasn't able to salvage much because, of course, there was devastation. However, they did manage to get material, to cobble together what would be useful and come up with something probably better than I would be able to cobble up myself in the situation. So they got together a shelter. But then, ShelterBox helped with shelter kits. And you can see a load of them being distributed here. Now, a shelter kit is pared down. There are fewer items in there. So there's something called a Cornish shovel, whatever that is. It's the shovel, basically, isn't it? There's a mattock, like a hoe. You've got the tarpaulins, rope, nails, saws, stuff like that. And each one of those, each shelter kit, is £69. So therefore, if we were to employ this as a response, we can reach far more people than a £600 box. Sometimes this is the right answer. Other times, something else is the right answer. So we showed them how to use the kits to build safer homes, to shelter whilst they are to shelter in waterproof structures whilst they actually build their homes. So here is Surya, but remember, like I said, if we give her this stuff, it's hers. She doesn't buy it off us. It is a gift to her, and then she does with it what she likes. So you can see here that what she did was she was able to use some of that to dig fields so that she could start to regain her livelihood. The new shelter I have is safer. I wouldn't be trapped again. So this was the earthquake in Nepal 2015. We helped provide shelter for 68,000 people during that time. However, as it says down here, our work never stops. Disasters and conflicts are always happening. But let's just focus on earthquakes for a moment. The earthquake in Nepal 2015 was a 7.2 on the Richter scale. So if we take that middle row there, this is going from the year 2000 all the way through to the year 2021. What do those numbers show you about the frequency of earthquakes over that 20-year period? It's consistent. Perhaps apart from this anomaly here in 2010, they are pretty much the same number of magnitude 7 earthquakes every year. Let's think about volcanoes then. So if I highlight this column to you, it might not be big enough to see, but this goes from the year 2000 up to the year 2021. And again, it's relatively consistent. The numbers are the same. We know, we can predict how many earthquakes are going to happen each year. We can predict how many volcanoes are going to happen each year. And science helps us to monitor volcanoes in particular. But look at this. This compound bar graph shows the red at the bottom, which are those geophysical disasters, the earthquakes, the volcanoes. But then if we add on the other colours, so tropical storms, flooding, extreme temperature, drought, you can see that between 1980 to 2016, there's a massive increase in those meteorological events, the hydrological events, the climatological events. Now have a look at this. This image shows the global coastal population in 1950. And the size of the dot represents, the big dot is 10 million people, more than 10 million people, a megacity living by the coast. But now, if you should look at this image, 1950, let's move on to 2020. Now you can see the number of people, how the number of people living by the coast, for example in Lagos, has increased dramatically. So we've looked at earthquakes, we've looked at volcanoes, but now have a look at this next image. The small dark green circle is the number of people who are exposed to tropical storms in 1970. So that was the year after I was born. This number of people, so for example, if we went over to Australia and New Zealand, in that area, 50,000 people, because it's in thousands, were exposed to tropical storms. But by 2030, that number will have doubled to 100,000 people. But I shouldn't be concentrating on Australia and New Zealand. Have a look at this up here. The year after I was born, in 1970, 68 million people were affected in Southeast Asia. However, in 7.5 years' time, that number will have doubled to 126 million people. And the interesting thing is when tropical storms, hurricanes happen over here in North America, we hear about it. We don't necessarily always hear about the superstorms which are affecting these people over here. So therefore, we will pre-position our aid in the Philippines because we know they're going to be affected by typhoons or other areas around there. We've got a few pre-positioned hubs around the world. One's in the Philippines, one's in Dubai, and another one over in Panama as well. So therefore, you can see that if we put these two images together, there is an increasing and continuing need for what we do, which is providing shelter for those people that don't have it, for the most vulnerable people, wherever that might be. So which brings me on to, I've got two more current operations for you. So in the Philippines, Typhoon Rai hit in December 2021. Down there, 1.7 million homes, 3.2 million people were displaced. Now, Project One was to support 7,000 families, and we responded as quickly as we could to help 7,000 families. Project Two is this, whereby we're trying to target 13,000 families, but in different ways, depending on what aid is required. So, for example, a shelter kit with a tarpaulin. You can see people here. There's a shelter kit. This chap has got shelter kits for 3 households. Or it could be a tarpaulin, a rope and a solar light. So people over here are queuing up to collect this aid from a distribution centre. But what you can't get in a shelter kit and what you can't get in a box is some of this stuff here. So we've started to provide some corrugated iron sheets, as well as cash. So speaking to the people after Typhoon Rai, they said, this is what we most need. So therefore we're providing it depending on what the area is, who the people are, and what they feel they require. In Ukraine, we're doing something similar, whereby we're targeting the people with different types of aid depending on what they need. So for example, those people who are in collective centres like community halls or schools, we'll be giving them mattresses, and there they all are. We're helping those people who are moving, who are forced to migrate, maybe it's from Mariupol, for example, and we're helping them with blankets, hygiene kits within the shelter kit style. But we're also going to people who have left Ukraine as well, perhaps into Moldova, and we're providing them with hygiene items and also cash. So you can see our response is not one size fits all. It really is amended and varied. So I said we raised £14 million last year. £14 million raised by any number of people, any type of people. So these scouts here, look, they raised £5,500 by just packing bags at supermarkets, for example, by doing chores around the house. These people did the London to Brighton, and they raised £1,520. Another group of people, they did the Thames bridges. So just cycling over all the bridges of the Thames, and they managed to raise £1,270 as well. This scout group, they camped out overnight, raised £650, which is a box or 10 shelter kits. There's other ways that we can raise money. So if any of you felt inclined to, I've got a QR code which you can just click on, and it will take you to a link, and you can make a donation. You can do this when you shop, for example, on Amazon. If you go to Amazon Smile, you can make a donation whilst you're shopping on Amazon, or there's other ways as well. So the giving machine, for example, is a way of raising funds. But perhaps something which might be even more appealing is this, the ShelterBox Book Club. Now I know that might clash with something that I saw you talking about earlier in your group, the book club there. But this is fantastic. You pay, I think it's tenner, something like that, and you get a book every month. And these are books, you vote for your book. I did have a video look, but I'm not sure it's going to work, so I'm not going to play it. You vote for a book to come through, and a book will come through from places you've never heard of, authors you've never heard of. And I'm a member of the book club, and it's fantastic because you would read something which you would never normally read. You might not never choose it off the shelf, but it's come through your letterbox, and you go, oh, I'll give it a go then. And they're just really heartwarming. They're fantastic, eye-opening books as well. Excuse me. So to summarise, it's essential for survival. It allows people to feel safe and secure, to stay healthy, protection from the weather, reduces vulnerability. It helps to maintain dignity, and it helps to keep those communities together so that they can rebuild, to go from the top left there to perhaps something like that. So I've been speaking to you for about 45 minutes. Thank you for your attention, but perhaps it's true that a picture paints 1,000 words. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I think you do a great job, Martin. Thank you. Really do. It was a great presentation, a real eye-opener, wasn't it? I mean, some amazing facts and figures, and the professionalism and the thought and the ingenuity that goes into it all is really quite amazing. You know, when we're faced, we're worried about how to
Shut you up.
how much it costs to fill your car and the price of electricity. It really puts things in perspective when you hear about some of these disasters that ShelterBox deal with. And I think you do a terrific job. Thank you very much for coming. Please show your appreciation.